come in. It's live. It says it's live. Let me verify it. There it goes. Share page. Hang on. I could share it to. Oh wait, we're live. Forgot. Share groups. Hello everyone. Yeah, we're live. Richie Sauter says you're live. All right, let's share it.
Or not?
No, I'm sharing it to a few groups I always share to. All right. 16 people in the house. Can y'all hear us all right? Let's see. Good topic. Shadow work. Can you guys hear us? Okay? Because I don't know. Yes. Thank you, Barb. All right. So we've been up in this cabin for 2 weeks, and we knew coming here that we were going to do a series of video presentations or discussions or whatever you want to call it on a few different subjects. And the first and foremost is shadow work. And shadow work's been talked about, inner work's been talked about for the last 2-3 years. It's been talked about more and more as time's gone on. Sometimes some of the stuff gets lost in it. And I think the other thing that comes to mind is that we think it's over. We think it's done. Like, shadow work is some kind of sacrifice or pain or suffering that we have to continuously go through. And maybe it's not like that. And we're going to talk about it a little bit. So I've known Morgan 4 years, and shadow work has always been, I think it's always been like the priority in our individual lives in the 4 years we've known each other. Hers is longer than that, I'm sure. Maybe mine was too. But as a couple, we realize how important the shadow work is before we start talking about ascension or sacred sex or herioscamos or sacred union within ourselves or with someone else. Doesn't really matter. Shadow work seems to be the primary vehicle for elevating in this transition we call ascension. So let me start it like this. Why are you so passionate about shadow work? I mean, obviously that came from your own individual experience. Can you tell us a little bit about how it's worked for you and why it's so important to you?
I think my first experience was hearing from universal intelligence. Actually, it was shown to me in a picture, and it was shown to me in the infinity symbol. And if you look at the infinity symbol, it's got 2 loops. It was shown to me at the time that in polarity, that one loop holds, say, control, and the other loop holds the opposite. If we look up control in the dictionary, what's the opposite of control? There's a whole bunch of different words, maybe subservience. Gosh, I wrote them down. I can't even think. But if you type in what's the opposite of control, there's a whole bunch of opposite words. And through that, through doing this exercise, we can see where we do it. And it might not be the same as everyone else. So for me, I had a controlling mother. I needed to look up the opposite, which was subservience. But it doesn't have to be subservience. By looking at the opposite, we can see our programming. I get so nervous on these. I'm sorry, I get lost.
It's all right. Everybody knows you. So let's back up. Let's back up a little bit. You, like many people, went through a successive years of trauma. Mm-hmm. Whatever that trauma is, everybody's had it, you know. And so how did you come across the fact, you know, what we call shadow work? How did you come across the magic of it, the transformational ability of it? What did that do for you? Maybe bring us up to now.
Well, I think the first thing that I started to talk about and then got so nervous I forgot about is I was shown it in an infinity symbol. If you think about an infinity symbol, it's like this. And they spoke to me about polarity and about the importance of 0 point in polarity. That if one was active in my external field, that I need to either own that part of the polarity. So if I look at controlling, you know, there were times that I slipped into being controlling, but the majority of the time I actually spent in this subservient side. For me, the really loud thing was that I had two partners, one I was married to and one that I wasn't. And on both occasions when I finished that relationship, I really recognised that both of them really looked like my mother. You know, even though they were men, when I finished with them, it was like, oh my God, he was so much like my mum. So from there I understood, and it was told to me from a higher perspective, or my higher self, that I was here trying to heal my childhood wounds.
Yeah.
And I was doing that through relationships. So when I finished with both of those relationships and I was shown this infinity symbol, I understood that, you know, if I was with a narcissist, I did everything I could to clear narcissism within myself, and it still wasn't fixed. And through study and research or whatever, I understood that the opposite spectrum or extreme of narcissism was empathy. And they were the same spectrum, so they were the same energy, but they were on, you know, different bandwidths. So I understood from that I actually needed to own and clear narcissism within myself, as well as the opposite extreme. And when I did that, I wrote a list of that last ex-partner, of everything that I thought that he was. First, I owned that, and I didn't feel much better. But when I started looking at the opposite polarities and healed those things, then everything changed.
So, I mean, a lot of people, when they look at shadow work, they look at the things that they know about themselves, like their failures and their regrets and, you know, whatever is standing out in front of them. But what you're saying, and this is good that we're talking about this, what you're saying is that it's not just what we know about ourselves, but it is it those things that we think we're not?
Absolutely it is. So when our relationship began, I'd been so thorough in my shadow work that I was able to hold the space for whatever you were going through. But occasionally there were things that you would present that were, you know, it was like, oh my God, I would never do that. I know I'm not that. What is this? So I had to look to the opposite extreme. But I had to own what you were as well, or what you were presenting as well, to 0 point the pattern altogether. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, of course, now we're talking a little bit about a relationship, but the whole point is that same opportunity presents itself in any interaction we have. You know, whether it be the clerk down the road at the store or a relative or a friend or whatever. But getting back to the transformational opportunity that shadow work or inner work offers. Many people that have come on the show have had traumatic experiences, including many of them, sexual abuse, and all other types of abuse. And I think we've gotten to a point now where we have kind of like disengaged from the possibility that it's someone else's fault or something external's fault. How do we start to integrate? How do we start to come to peace with these things we've gone through if we can't blame anybody else?
Okay, great question. What I was asked to do was to write lists about each one of those individuals that I had been in relation with, because relation is the gold. Relation is where we find ourselves. And it's so tricky because everything's the opposite. You know, we go into relationships in polarity. So if we own all of that polarity as our own, then we can start seeing why we brought that into us. So if I'm an overgiver, if I am an overgiver, then I'm always going to create an overtaker to come into my life. So how do I fix that? I actually own the overgiving and the overtaking and 0 point the pattern altogether. For me, I see who I am as further an expanded field of energy beyond this human skin, and see it as almost like a computer program where I can look at it from a higher perspective rather than taking it personally, you know, rather than going into the story and say, well, he did this and he did this, or she did that and she did that. I can look at what is it that I think that they did and what is the opposite of that, because when I write a list down of what do I think this person did to me, and then I write down the opposite extreme, that's where I'm going to see myself actually in both. You know, I have been controlling in my life. I played the role of subservient far too much, but I didn't recognize where I was being controlling. So by owning both of the aspects, owning both of them and clearing both of them, then I was able to 0 point all of it. And when I sat down and did a list on my mother, my father, all of my siblings, my exes or whatever, I became clearer and clearer and clearer. So then when I actually accidentally entered, because I didn't even want a relationship, but when I accidentally
How could you resist?
when I accidentally entered a relationship, I was so clear. I was so clear on so many of the typical issues within relationships that I was actually able to hold the space for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And not buy into the stories or any of the games, relationship games or anything. And it made like a conscious union a lot easier.
Well, let's go back to the individual journey, because that's what most people can identify with, because it does start to externalize and you do start to have the physical manifestation of whatever you've done or where you're at, you know, inside yourself. And Melissa, we will come back to that question. I think we can do that. But let's go back to the shadow work and the inner work. And what I mean is specifically in regard to, okay, let's just go deep by human standards. So I'm talking to somebody who has been raped and molested from the age of 2 or 3 years old to the mid-teens. I think, you know, it's very difficult for people to get past the point of not assessing blame on someone. And if we're lucky enough to get to that point and blessed enough to get to that point, then it becomes something that is our own responsibility, which is what you're talking about. And so what I'm getting at is, you know, in the shadow work, you talk about 0 pointing the two extremes. If you're at this extreme over here and you're a victim, and that's the victimizer, or you're over here at this extreme and you're the empath and they're the narcissist, how do you zero point those two things or any other two things in the spectrum, the one that you totally identify with and the one that you can't identify with at a human level?
For me, I did it many ways. I did a lot of work on the perpetrators, through my childhood. It was very difficult for me to bring them up as adult men, so my higher self told me to bring them up as children. Bring up a 7-year-old little boy, and have your conversation with a 7-year-old little boy. The things that I really couldn't cope with, I would use a friend who had not experienced sexual assault and use them as a proxy. So I would get them to connect with their higher selves, bring my higher self in, and have them communicate with the energy that had been the perpetrator, to clear. Some things we have, what would you call it? Almost like walls built around, and it's too hard for us to face, and that's okay. But we have friends, and we have people.
So that's where the proxy comes in. So I mean, I'm just trying to put this on the more human part of understanding. So basically, what you're saying is that, first of all, there's more than one way to get to the 0 point.
Absolutely.
But in terms of like the human who's in the trenches, who's like the ostrich with the head in the ground, and not by fault, but has so much of their experience ingrained in them, they're not able to see the bigger picture. How do you 0 point these extremes? One, from what you're saying, is to find a proxy. Could that be something like just telling someone what happened? Can you explain a proxy versus just a traditional energy practitioner meeting with a client type of
thing? Yes. My wounded ego was so clever that it built up all these walls around me to protect me, the human being, from ever having to go through, I've already done the suffering. I don't need to re-suffer the suffering. So my wounded my wounded ego will set up all these walls to prevent me from ever having to experience that again. But Morgan might go, well, I can't kiss. I can't kiss because, that was such a traumatic experience as a 3-year-old with grown men trying to kiss me. So I will try my best to connect with the energy of the men that did that to me. It's very traumatic to actually bring up a perpetrator in front of you, but to actually allow them to be little boys and have a conversation with the little boys will work. If I can't do that, then I will grab somebody who's willing, who's visual, and who can actually look into the energy and dimensions, and I'll ask them to do this work for me. If they haven't been through it, it's going to be very, very easy for them because they don't have the same blocks. So they will bring up the perpetrator, and I can ask them to ask the perpetrator questions. What needs to happen here to return this energy back to pure love? Does that make sense?
Yeah. And so another thing too would be like, oftentimes, I guess, I mean, I'm thinking of that. So if you want to pull up the energy of the extreme, which would be, in our experience, a perpetrator, that might be difficult. But the first thing you said was to pull them up, but to pull them up as a child, who's still innocent and genuine and open and free and at peace, right? I mean, that seems like a very important thing that we can do, right? I mean, that seems, because so often we do connect these extremes with personalities. And if we're going to lose our personality in this ascension, lose our identities, why would we still hold others to the ones that we thought they were, right? So you take it back to a place where they are the innocent child that they truly are, right? Yeah. You're supposed to elaborate. So shadow work, a lot of things, many things, not just in the ascension communities, lightworker communities, but so many things that become popular can have these cliches and these, immediate antidotes and all this stuff. But it's really something that shadow work and inner work is really something that we, even if we want to, we can't get away from. Like the universal energies that are ascension or apocalypse, if you look up the definition of apocalypse, it is unveiling. We are in an unveiling. We are finding out the truth. And what could be more central to that than the truth of ourselves to ourselves? So shadow work is not going to go away.
I don't know at the moment. I still really love it. For me, just in our relationship with you, I thought that I'd done everything I possibly could. And then you would present me with some things, and I'm like, well, I would never do that. How can this still be me? But what I did was I would write down a list of what I thought you were doing or what I thought you were being. I would own all that as my own and clear it. But I would also look at the polar opposites. So many of us are doing so much shadow work, and we're clearing one aspect of the same energy, the same spectrum, and we're not looking at the opposite energy of the spectrum. So I would, if Todd was a wild, one of the things I write down, he's too wild. And then I'd write down, well, I'm too hidden or I'm too quiet. So I'd clear both. And then I would no longer have resistance to who he was or what he was presenting. And it was so valuable for me to go through my exes, siblings, parents, to see where all that old programming was and do the same thing with all of it. I spoke to somebody today who wants to be in a relationship and experiencing all of these adverse experiences, adverse energies. And I said to this person, what is your belief around love? Sit down and write a list about what your belief around relationships, love, sexuality are. Because the majority of the people on this planet have such an ingrained belief that love hurts. So just by actually understanding that and then looking for the polarities and clearing both, then this is the true and the real shadow work. Seeing somebody else and clearing that and coming to a place of peace is not enough, because it's still active. The energy is still active. The stories might look different, but the energy is still active. So we actually have to clear the dualistic nature of the whole pattern.
Yeah. So what we think is, I guess what you're saying is it's easy to find what we identify with, but it's not so easy to identify with what we think we're not. And that's a big thing. I mean, you talk about, let's talk about this. Let's talk about the list. What does that mean, make a list? I mean, as I understand it, I have a good reason to. If I made a list of all my failures, if I made a list of all the things I don't like about my mother or father or sister or brother or ex-spouse, and the things I do, and the things that I do like about them. And then you took me to a place where you said, okay, now replace them with you.
Yeah. If you're going to do a list, and if you are going to do a list, first look at, well, they are, and then look at, well, where am I that? Where am I in this? And the majority of the time you'll actually see where you do that. By actually sitting down and writing a list, it brings it into full consciousness, and you can see, well, my mother's controlling. Oh, well, actually, I'm controlling here as well. But if you look at where the opposite of controlling, and honestly, it's worth typing in what is the opposite, because it can be many, many things. The opposite controlling here is surrendering, subservient, inconsistent, oversensitive, empathetic, nervous, obedient, people-pleasing. You know, one of them or more of them will be me. By me actually clearing all of the things opposite to controlling as well as controlling, then I 0 point that whole energetic pattern together and it can disappear.
Yeah, and I think another thing that's important is if you see someone, I'm just speaking from my experience, if you start to make a list and say, this person is controlling, they might be controlling to like a really large degree. And then you ask yourself, where am I controlling? And I have found that there's a little part. It may not be this big giant thing, but it's still there. And I'm controlling.
Also, more important, adding to that is, where do I control myself?
Mm-hmm.
Where am I doing externally? Where am I doing internally? And this is my program. So, and really, if you grew up with a controlling mother or father, then that's part of your program. So if we look at ourselves past the physical being and look at our energetic field as a program, we can start taking the stories less personally and start looking at the actual energy of what's presenting. So if something's presenting externally, somehow we are, well, not somehow, we are creating that. So when we 0 point that ourselves, then it becomes a lot simpler.
Let's go to a difficult subject. So to our friend Melissa's question, which is gone now, I can't see it. But in general, what that is, like, so much of what happens to us is on a one-to-one human interaction. Most of the time, it has to do with people that are very close to us, our closest circles. So when someone is in our field at a very close proximity, which is typically going to be, spouse, mother, father, sister, brother, child, that type of thing, or maybe a lifelong friend or whatever. So when in that interaction, there's a severe imbalance or a severe lack of congruency, how do we approach that? Can we actually affect that by doing the inner work and doing the shadow work? Will it have an effect? And if so, how? On the other person?
Everything that we're doing here is about relation. If some external self, and we are all each other, but if some external self is doing something that makes us uncomfortable, they are showing us an energetic program within self. I can't remember your question.
Well, what I'm saying is like, okay, so right, you got that right. So let's say I have a relationship with whatever, a relative, be it my mother, my father, my child, whatever the case is. And there is, as I elevate, there is a more pronounced lack of congruity, right? Lack of congruence. And if I do not focus on them, and I focus on myself as inner work and shadow work should be, will I affect the relationship? Will I affect the lack of congruence? Okay. Will I be able to make it better? What should I do?
Okay. Well, we never can control or have any say over the free will of another human being. But if I have a relationship and there's an energy that's going back and forth between us, I see it like a rubber band. He's being this and I'm being this. When I really clear this in myself, if you imagine a rubber band and two people holding a rubber band, and one really lets go and owns all of her own stuff, and she lets go of the rubber band, what happens with the rubber band?
It hits the other person in the face.
So when you're not holding the opposite extreme or the opposite polarity of the gain the energy that's going on between you, and you really do the work in yourself, then the rubber band gets let go of, and you clear in yourself what's yours, then everything else that's not yours goes back to the other person. Now it's 100% up to them. When they can feel it all, it becomes so uncomfortable. They're either going to do the work to clear it in themselves, or they're going to hate you even more and project even more. But the fact that if you've done it, you automatically land in a place of pure love, whether you're going to choose to have an ongoing relationship with them or not. You've cleared the polarity that you were holding for the other and yourself, and that is relationship. We are here, and everything is about relation. Everything is about zero pointing all polarity, all duality. And, you know, I spent years and years and years, well, why do I have to do this? Why can't he do that? And I spent a few years, you know, trying to talk to the other about, you know, this is your responsibility. And it doesn't work like that. You know, he is me. Everything is me. If I just do my own work, then the rubber band will get flicked back if and where it needs to. They will feel it more so. I'm no longer playing the game. I've got a favourite saying that I was told many, many years ago, and that's, I am not having a relationship with my own wounded ego, which for me is my child wounds. Please don't be surprised if I refuse to have one with yours.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of like where we're at now, I mean, okay, shadow work was what it was and is 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, or 10, 15 years ago for people like you. Is there a better way to bring balance or clarity or truth to any interaction we have one-to-one with someone else? Because that's mostly what we deal with. Is there a better way? Is there any better way than to address this in the ethers through our own shadow work?
I don't know. That's a really difficult question. I mean, perhaps you can go to a Reiki master who will put you on their bed and put their hands on you and create all this sort of magic and everything is fixed. For me, this has been the most powerful way for me personally. I was told 20 years ago, like, if I can undo polarity, if I can 0 point all duality, then I'm going to be balanced in myself, and I'm going to be able to be capable of creating the things that I actually do want, because I'm not going to have this dualistic unconscious thing sitting in the background, you know, controlling. I'm going to go back to that. Until I addressed my own controlling, and it was easy for me to point the finger outwards at an ex-husband and a mother or whatever and say, well, it was all of them and I've been subservient my whole life. But until I actually addressed the places where I was controlling, then I was still going to pull in the opposite extreme to show me the duality. The more that I've done shadow work and addressed this, the easier life has got. The more I've been able to manifest, the more comfortable my relationships have been. Yeah, I don't know. I am so passionate about shadow work. For me, my shadow work that I did in doing all of that led me to you.
Yeah, that's what my next question was. No, so like on a personal level, when did you start to see the connection between real shadow work and manifestation or miracles or magic or however you want to put it?
Immediately. If you spent...
Like, where were you at when that happened? Like, where were you at in your head, in your life? When did you go, oh my God, I just did this and this happened?
Every time I did a list with somebody in my life, I would, within 3, 4, maybe 5 days maximum, see a significant change in my external life. Anything I do energetically happens immediately in my field. My brain is slow, so it takes my brain 2 to 5 days to actually catch up and the new neural pathways are created before I can see externally. But immediately, everything that I took responsibility for and 0 pointed I would immediately see it in my external creations, in my external field. You know, when we first met, I put you onto this work, you did it yourself. Like our relationship expanded and expanded and expanded, incredibly. Incredibly. I mean, you changed yourself just by this, amazingly. Like I think you did it non-stop all day, every day for about 5 weeks.
It took me 1 hour.
It took you, what, 1 hour?
No.
Nothing takes you 1 hour.
So going back.
You even take longer to eat than 1 hour.
So going back to what most of us, I'm going to use myself, most of us contend with, and that is somebody that's really close to us, as defined by the old paradigm. Someone that's really close to us, be it a child or a parent or brother, sister, or friend. Okay, so it's in those things that occur to us, closely to us, closest to us. It's, I guess for me anyway, the way I see it, it's much more difficult to see them as me. Right? So I want to affect the relationship. I want to affect in a positive way the congruency between myself and the other person. Do I speak to the other person? Do I keep it within my own field and do my shadow work and inner work?
That's
Keep going. Keep going.
It looks like it's disconnected.
All right, hang on. No, it's still going. Hang on a second. It'll come back. Remember the question. We're live. Don't trust us. Damn. Well.
What's the code? Your
Still on.
hotspot?
No, you're good. You're good. We're still good. Okay. Keep going.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm watching.
There is no other person. There is no other person, not ever. We are just our individual selves. And if we start doing everything as an individual, then we recognize that there is no other person, and everything external that we see is presented to us because of an imbalance within ourselves. Even within our relationship, both of us live all day, every day, like individuals. We don't have to discuss everything with each other. In fact, 9 times out of 10, we do not discuss anything. We can feel if there's an out of alignment with us. We go into silence. We both go our separate ways. We look at what's going on, and then we naturally align together to review what happened over the last few days or the last few hours or whatever. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. So, yes, it does. So we're still good. I'm watching both. All right. So,
you're excessively loud and excessively open, and you like being on here and talking to people, and I'm opposite. I prefer to be hidden and quiet and small, and I probably should do this list. And sometimes that's perfect in a relationship as well. But if I started resenting your loudness and your openness and your out there or whatever, then I would know it was an issue. So I would have to own. I would write a list and say, he's loud, he's overly talkative, I would write a list down and I would own everything that he is as my own, because he is me. But then I would also look at the dualistic nature of that, or the polarity, and own all that as well. There's no one else but me.
Yeah.
So anything outside of myself that I'm saying, especially if I'm triggered by it, is mine. There hasn't, a lot of people are talking about shadow work, but a lot of people not many are talking about how do you actually do it. Shadow work is zero pointing duality. It's zero pointing polarity. And if we can do this in our relationships, and we have a lot of, I say silence is golden. If both of us can feel when something's out of balance, and we'll both acknowledge we're not in alignment, let's not try to force a conversation about this. Let's not try to force the other to match what I'm thinking. Or we both go into our own space. We go into silence, whether it's hours or days or whatever. We work on it in ourselves. And then both of us can feel when we're in alignment together, and we'll sit down and we'll review. What did you learn? What did I learn? And it gets shifted because we've actually shifted it in our energetic field. We are really like computers. We are energetic beings beyond the skin, beyond the body. I see everything as energetic information and programming, sitting in my field that's actually read by all my other selves reading it. So whatever they deliver to me is me. Now, if I don't like it, if this human being doesn't like it, it immediately is almost like an alarm to say, you've got something within your field that's not of pure love.
So, I mean, I think it's safe to say if you pull up your mother, your father, your ex-partner, spouse, children, and maybe anyone else that might fall in a very close circle, if you have any feelings of uncomfortableness or agitation or whatever the case is, that's the best place you can go to elevate and expand and 0 point.
Yeah. 0 pointing is what we're actually meant to be doing. We get triggers and we convince ourselves or do whatever it takes to find a place of comfort with that. But if we haven't done the polarity, then the cycle remains, and it's going to come back and see you again. And it's going to come back and see you again. All of our programming came from Father God and Mother Goddess, our parents. As little children, they were our Father God and Mother Goddess. What they said was absolute truth.
Yeah.
Was absolute truth. And all of that information is in our programming. And so what do? We sought partners to perfection that would present same energy, different stories. And we stayed and stayed and stayed and tried and tried and tried because we were determined to heal these childhood wounds. But when we actually start looking at the childhood wounds from an energetic perspective rather than the stories, and look at their polarities, that's when we start 0 pointing ourselves and reprogramming to what we actually do want.
So, homework. If somebody wanted to simply address and directly address shadows, which means on the other side of it, expansion, what would you recommend?
To my clients, the first thing I say is write down a list of your mother. Write down everything that you perceive is wrong or not right or not great. Write write the whole list on your mother. And before you move on to anyone else, write a list of polarities, the opposites to everything that you write down about her. Write the opposite energy. Own everything that your mother does. Own all of the opposite. Use an invocation, use Ohopo-Ono, Access Consciousness has a great invocation, a great clearing tool. I have a great clearing tool. If you wrote, there are clearing tools all throughout the internet. Actually go through, because you're worth it, and clear every single one of them. The energy that your mother presented, as well as the opposite that you acted, as well as, by doing both, you're clearing both. Then write down a list of your father, all the things that you perceived wrong or not right about him. Write down next to those words the polarities, the opposites. See yourself in all of it and use a clearing tool to clear all of it. Exes are phenomenal. They are our greatest gold. Our greatest gold. Go through your exes, write down a list of the things that you perceive to be wrong about them. What did they do to me? Who were they? Write all of it down. Then go down the list and write the opposites. You are going to see so much of your mother or your father or both in all of that, because it's you as an energy trying to actually heal the childhood wounds and the dualistic programming you were taught as a child. Do it with your teachers, do it with your exes, do it with your best friends, do it with your children, do it with your parents. Our job is to 0 point all of that old programming, and we can't 0 point without doing the polarity energies.
So if I look at my parent or brother, sister, or child or ex-partner, and I make a list, and that list starts with this person is that, this person is this, and so on, I'm probably going to start with the things that are closest to me, which I might consider furthest from me in terms of what I am and who I am. But what you're saying is that in this process, and let's talk about an invocation or what clearing modalities there are, you're saying that in this process, you're actually, or the person is actually saying, I am that as well.
Yeah, own all of it. I remember last year you had early last year, you had a nasty shock. You were really upset. And I was sitting over in Adelaide, and I could see that you'd fallen completely into victim consciousness. It wasn't my job to ring you up and say, oh my God, you're being a victim. What I did instead was go, oh my God, he's in victim consciousness. And then I said, I am not having a relationship with victim consciousness, not with myself or any other. Thank you, it is done. And within 24 hours, you rang me up and said, oh my God, I was completely in victim consciousness. So, you know, just that statement, I am not having a relationship with victim consciousness, not within myself or any other. Thank you, it is done, was me both owning the victim consciousness I couldn't see in myself, as well as the victim consciousness that I could see in him. And then it was cleared. Why are you laughing?
Because that's the only time it ever happened in my whole life.
Not being a victim. You've been walking around holding your testicles, screaming all day. That's victim consciousness.
Oh.
I don't have a single testicle. You know, there is no, I mean, everything, we're moving out of duality. And I've got this necklace on which I've worn for about 10 plus years. It's called a Taurus knot. It's the Trinity. We've been moving. We've been given the opportunity to move out of the dualistic nature. You know, if you look at it as a simple as the infinity into Trinity. If we look at victim, perpetrator, you know, there's two opposites. I'm either the victim or I'm a perpetrator, and maybe I flip between two. But there's a third energy that we need to clear as well, and that's the martyr. You know, the martyr wants to talk about being the victim or maybe even being the perpetrator. You know, we need to clear. We need to clear the dualistic nature and the polarity of ourselves and take responsibility for the creators that we are. And being the perfect creators, we've got all these actors around us that are going to give us the polarity and the duality of self. So every single thing that happens all day, every day, including governments and systems or whatever, is the energy of me. So the more that I go in and own all of that and 0 point it all, the clearer I become. For me personally, it feels like I've been growing up for years. 15, 20 years ago, I was a 30-year-old woman, still very, able to flip into a teenager or whatever. Since I've been doing this work, I've become clearer and clearer and clearer. I don't play games. I don't have arguments. I very rarely raise my voice. And if I do, it's specifically to show somebody, this is what you're doing to me. This is what it feels like. I'm not having this anymore. The clarity has been phenomenal. I believe shadow work that I did, even though I didn't want a relationship, led me into a divine conscious union with a man that also had that same commitment to his own shadow work. And
no shadow.
oh my God, you were
I'm
totally
just
full of
playing
shadow
around.
when we first met.
Believe me.
But I've done enough to be able to hold the space for him, and he did this work so quickly. And it's not to say that we still don't have some. It's just that the power of zero pointing everything that's shown to us makes relation so much easier.
Yeah, and I think too, the thing about shadow work is that it's a doorway to a lot of things. I don't know where that starts or where it ends, but I mean things such as creating space for better things in the external equalization in your life, partners, just your whole experience. My question is, at the gut level, how long, okay, let's say I have a problem and the major personality that is the face of my major problem in my life experience might be a person, might be a mother, a father, a sister, a brother, whatever. How long does it take to get to a point where you can actually look at that person, and say, that's me, and you're free? I mean, is there a time frame? Is there any signs that you're getting there? Does it take a while? Is it immediate?
That's a great question too. I think it depends on how much responsibility that we're going to take. When you sit down with a piece of paper and you're actually prepared to sit down and go down your own rabbit hole, this person's doing this, and this. What's the opposite energy? Where am I doing that? Where am I doing the opposite? It's almost instantaneously. When we try to do it just through the mind and we're not being thorough, we're actually not committed to doing the shadow work ourselves.
Does shadow work hurt?
Yes, it can do. If we're looking at it from a story perspective, absolutely it can hurt.
Do we have to relive every trauma? Do we have to go through all the pain again?
Only if we want to. My higher self told me about 15 years ago, you've already suffered this. Why do you want to re-suffer the suffering?
How can we go through it without the pain?
Whatever way you can find. For me, I did most of it myself. When I came across things that were too hard and causing too much trauma for me, I knew I didn't have to re-suffer the suffering, so I would find somebody who was willing to be a proxy for me.
Can you go back to that? I mean, this is important, I think. So you told me that in your early 30s, you started to have these memories of the sexual abuse, the rapes, and all that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you would curl up in a ball crying, and I think a lot of us can identify with that, in our own traumas and all that. But you hit a point where you said to your higher self, I don't want to go through this anymore. Is there a way to do it? What happened?
No, that's not true. No. I did all of my work. I was raped by 4 men from 3 through to 13, and I did all of it myself. And I don't know how I did it. I look back and it nearly killed me. Then I found out, I had a 16-year-old daughter at the time, and I found out that she had, we call it in Australia, WAG school, on one day, and she got raped by a 17-year-old man, and she didn't have the courage, and not many would at 16. But I wanted to help her. So I said to my higher self, how can I do this? How can I help my 16-year-old daughter without having her to go through everything that I went through? And my higher self taught me proxy work. So I asked all of my friends if they would be willing to be a proxy for her, which meant that they could go in as her. So I would bring up, they would bring them in, I would ask them to bring their higher selves in and ask their higher self permission to do it, and they'd say yes. So then I would ask them to bring up the energy of my daughter and ask permission from the energy of my daughter, can we do this? And that she would say yes. I had my daughter always there. I never ever did anything without her. And she would actually control the session. So, for example, I'd say to my friend who was proxying for my daughter, what needs to happen here in order to bring this back to pure love? And my friend might say, your daughter needs to confront this person. So I'd look to my daughter and say, are you happy to do that? My daughter would say yes. So then my friend could say to the energy of the perpetrator, yes, we're going to do this. And so with the three of us, as me facilitator, my daughter as the client,
Yeah.
and a friend as a proxy, through the three of us, energy was able to be cleared without my daughter having to go through the trauma of the experience. It was very, very important that I didn't disempower my daughter, that she was in total control, like nothing ever happened without her permission. But I found out through that we didn't actually have to relive what we'd been through, that there was an easier way. You know, my higher self said to me years before that, you've already suffered. You don't have to keep doing, you don't have to re-suffer the suffering. There are much, much easier ways to clear energy without having to relive it all.
Yeah. So this is where I was going. So, like, if you're a person and you're out there on your own, we're not on our own, but you're on your own, and we've all been in that space where there's nobody else that can understand and all that stuff, and it's just you and the universe, universal isolation. The universe says you don't have to go through this pain and suffering to clear this, right?
Yeah.
You've experienced that. I've been witness to it in proxy sessions where I've been the proxy, where we say, or you say as a practitioner to the client, do you want to clear this? And the client says, okay, then I would say and then you would tell me, ask the higher self if they're happy to clear this. And I would say that, and then there might be a starburst or a geometric figure that would spin, or there might be some other kind of imagery or metaphoric, image that would energetically transform and clear everything.
Yes.
Can people do that on their own?
Yes, absolutely they can. In the beginning, it's easier to have somebody in front of you. You know, you close your eyes and you have this person who's actually just talking you through it. So I would say to you, close your eyes, let me know when you're ready. And then I would say to you, bring up your higher self, let me know when you can see your higher self. And you would say, yes, okay, I can see him. So we'd have a conversation with your higher self. We'd ask for permission. You know, what needs to happen here? Is there something you want to say to Todd? And you would get all that information yourself. Is there an easy way, with ease and grace, to clear this energy? You know, for me, energy is energy. It's either operating at a lower vibration or a higher vibration, simply waiting our instruction. We make things so complicated by buying into the stories. You know, I did breath work for a few years, and it was very, very powerful. But it was no different than actually having somebody close their eyes and communicate directly with their higher self. Breath work brings up all the somatic memories, it brings everything up, and you do the trauma to release it. Talking to a higher self, the higher self doesn't want you to suffer again. You already suffered this in your life. The higher self will do whatever it can to shift this lower vibrational energy back to pure love, back to its highest potential, simply by you asking.
Yeah, I agree. Well, you told me the first step in transformation is being aware.
Yeah, as soon as we have awareness, then we can say, okay, I want this done quickly, with ease and grace, in the most simplistic way possible. Will I go and book in with a breath worker? Will I go and have counselling? Will I go and do this? Or do I just want to transform the energy immediately and give myself 2 to 5 days for the neural pathways to be created to catch up with this energy that I actually transformed instantaneously? Now, when we transform that energy, we can feel the body feels it. It does take 2 to 5 days for the brain to catch up with, what did I just do?
Yeah.
How did I just transform another aspect of my life? What programming or pattern did I just completely transform?
Do you want to keep going?
Only if you want to.
I do, but I got to go to the voice room. So let me leave you with this, and you can talk to him. So what happens? What happens when you do shadow work? What happens when you do real shadow work beyond the mind and you actually 0 point stuff? What are the consequences of that? I'll be back.
For me, it's like every time I did a set of shadow work, particularly on a person or not actually, it felt like another layer of dark glasses had been removed. You know, I'd walk outside the next day, everything looked clearer, the colours looked different. When I spoke to people, I could see more of their shadow, and not in a judgmental way, but a compassionate way. It's like everything just became so much clearer. I stopped arguing, I stopped buying into stuff, I stopped playing games, I became more direct. It was very easy to enter a relationship with Todd because I could see all of his shadow. I didn't have to argue about anything. Every time he presented me with something, I would just do a list again. You know, currently what is going on? Do I have to say anything to him? No, and 9 times out of 10, I absolutely didn't. The clarity just became phenomenal. For me personally, it felt like, oh my God, I'm finally growing up. For me, there's no difference between ascension or growing up. I started parenting myself. I started looking after myself a lot more. I didn't have to think about boundaries anymore. They were just automatically there. Everything changed. Oh, the most important thing that changed was the less lower vibrational energy that I had within me, the more I became connected to the whole universe. The louder my higher self got, the multidimensional aspects got. If other beings need to come in, they got really clear. I don't know. That's it. You're not going to the toilet. You look like you're making a cup of tea or something, and I've run out of things to say. Todd,
What? What are you saying?
I don't know.
I heard something about the toilet.
I said you're not in the toilet. I can hear you in the kitchen.
Yeah, it was though. Right.
Well,
All right.
I just said that, you know, the more shadow work that I did, and the more of this lower vibrational 3D stuff that I cleared, the old programming, automatically the clearer the multidimensional, the universal intelligence, the one universal mind started getting with me.
Well, I guess what I'm getting at is however the universe speaks with any of us, you're going to know if you're really doing shadow work and you're not bullshitting yourself, you're going to know that you've hit pay dirt because miraculous things are going to happen.
Your external environment starts reflecting incredibly, you know, in relation. One thing I did find is, which was difficult, but, you know, a lot of relationships actually just disappeared.
Yeah.
And although it was really hard on the human, I actually don't need that energy to show me that stuff anymore because I've actually cleared it.
Yeah.
You know, I was an excessive people pleaser, and everywhere I went, I overdid. I overdid. My job, I renovate houses, furniture. For me, I'm a transformer. I'm myself first. I share my tools with clients. If I'm not doing that, I'm painting, I'm renovating furniture, I like doing gardens. And so for certain people, I would go and do that to their homes. My last trip back to Adelaide, I realised I actually don't have to do that.
You overdid it.
I overdid everything.
Which a lot of people can identify with.
So I said to this person who I've known for 48 years, I feel like I've done enough. I really feel like I've done enough. I don't need to do any more. And that was taken really, really badly, and that friendship ended, which was very, very sad for the human self. Very sad for the human self. But an important thing for me to realise that I don't actually have to overdo for others to be accepted.
Has it's okay. I'm not going to preface it. The more shadow work you do, because I think the human aspect that we are, that part of us, which is predominant, tends to take things personally in regard to themselves and other people. The more shadow work you do, which is really energy work, right? You're transmuting, transforming, reprogramming, whatever. Does it become easier? Does it become less personal? Are you able to clear things without feeling the the impression of the personal involvement? Does it take it out?
Yes, it does. It becomes less and less personal all along. The more that you do this, the more that you realise that it's all just stories that the human mind has created to validate that this is real. But when you bypass that and you actually said, this is my energy field, I'm just reprogramming, then the stories become less important, less attachment.
Yeah, this is cool. Yeah, so it's like it's weird because it becomes less personal, so therefore less humanly emotional. But at another level, there's this
More freedom.
well, more freedom, but there's closer
Connection to self.
yeah, and therefore other people.
And therefore other people. We see ourselves as absolute individuals. We operate as absolute individuals. There are some days we don't even speak to each other because we just need our own space. There's not necessarily anything wrong, but I love it because if I wake up and I'm quiet, he's just so tuned in, he just leaves me alone for a day or 2 or 10 or whatever it is. He understands that I'm doing something. He doesn't have to take it personally. He doesn't have to try to fix it. He just honours that this is this being over here that's doing their own individual stuff. I don't have to take anything personally. I can just do my own individual stuff too. Is that what you were
Yeah,
alluding to?
Well, I think it's difficult. I mean, we think that and I'm not taking anything away from anything, but we think that really hard abuse, sexual, physical, emotional, mental, these things that stand out, particularly single incidents that were really, really traumatic. Those are in one category, but there's another category where it's your day-to-day stuff. And we've all felt this in relationships with a partner, the day-to-day stuff where we give away, and therefore we endure, or with the parent or with the brother or sister, whatever the case is. It's very personal. We look at this energy and we go, that's that person. What I'm getting at is that with additional shadow work, or the more we go into it, and the more we take responsibility for ourselves, does it become less personal in terms of the attachment we have to the externalization of who we're pointing it at?
If I look at that screen there, it says that it's disconnected.
Yeah.
Does that mean it's disconnected, or is
No,
it still?
it's still running.
Okay. There is no personal. There is no stories. There is no other. There's nothing. There's only self. And the more of this work that you do, the more you understand that none of the stories are real. None of it is real. Some of the sayings I've been taught over the years is this. None of this is even real. Mind your own business. I can't remember what you asked. more and more and
Well,
more
no,
clarity.
you're
Please.
answering it. It becomes less personal. That's the whole point. Our human aspect, as Franco says. Franco refers to the human part of us as the human aspect, not the soul, not the spirit. And I asked him one time, and I said, does the human aspect have the opportunity or the reality of perpetuity? He said it's almost a soul, right? He said it's almost a soul, as he understands it right now. My point is that in our human aspect, where we're 99% present, all of us, regardless of our dimensional experiences, we're here. I'm Todd, you're Morgan, and so on. It just seems that the less personal that we're making it, which involves other people, mother, father, sister, brother, ex-spouse, the more vibrant it becomes. And all I'm saying is that with more and more shadow work for you in your own experience, because it's been a long, long time. I know you started on this 20 years ago. Has it become less personal? Do you not take as much of an offense? Are you able to look at this person who is a victimizer, let's just say? Are you able to look at them as just energy, as you would look at any other form of energy?
Yeah, absolutely. The 3D is dualistic. It's polarity. The more that I 0 point out of that realm, and I don't like labels at all, but if we look at it as a frequency, the more that I actually clear the frequency of me that I was attached to that, the more that I'm actually able to come out of it and look at everything as energy and actually step into something different. For me, it's going to be very important that I don't then step into 5D labels, into 5D beliefs, into, what would you say is 5D? What are some of the terms for 5D?
Priestess.
I'm a priestess and I'm a ashatar of and I'm a, it's going to be important for me not to step out of the 3D terms and labels and stories and energy as I break out of that and allow myself to become nothing.
Yeah.
And everyone's talking about ascension, but I'm going to say again, it hasn't felt like ascension for me. It's felt like I'm actually growing up. I'm becoming a clear, grown-up human being.
And so here's, to me, another thing about shadow work is like, because it does get complex. You've got people that are doing light language, you've got people that are downloading Arcturians and toning, and you got this and you got that, and elementals and all this stuff. But we're 99% of the time, we're human. And if I look at shadow work, there's like a boots on the ground level and method that we can actually go to work with. And it doesn't require you, doesn't require anyone else. It's just me and the universe. And we can actually go into this abyss and go, okay, so-and-so raped me. So-and-so abused me mentally or emotionally or whatever the case is. And we can convert that picture into all there is, which is us. At a human level, that seems to carry a lot of gold to me. Because if I can forgive that person, and I don't mean forgive like in the human way, I mean like it's not even real, like you said. Yeah.
There is nothing to forgive. I remember when we were still in Kauai, we had one night there, and that hurt me on the night, but I mean, by the next day I was like, wow. Being told, like all the sexual abuse and rapings and all of that I've experienced throughout my childhood, and then going into narcissistic abuse and violent abuse and physical, like at every possible level. And then my higher self said to me, 2 or 3 months ago, just before we left, you're a specialist. You went through all of that to become a specialist in the darker side of those things, from one extreme to then now become a specialist in the opposite extreme. So, if I look back through my life, especially through childhood, and go, oh my God, I know everything there is to know about sexual abuse, to then go, okay, now I'm ready for what's the opposite of abuse? Sexual
pleasure. Well, but it is, though, really.
I did all of that to understand all of that, so then I can start aligning with. And what did I do? What I did was understand that sacred sexuality was actually within my own DNA. Yeah. So I went in, had a session with my higher self, and said to my higher self, okay, I'm ready for this now. And she activated the DNA within me to actually start understanding and knowing sacred sexuality. And same with everything,
Well, I wasn't kidding. I mean, I'm serious. Whether you're talking with an adjective of sexual or not. So you have pain and you have pleasure. And that's what I see about the shadow work, is that this pain is, there's another side to it. Like, we spend so much time talking about, the energy's coming down and this is happening and that's happening. But what about all the progress we've made? What about that? What about the people that have bilocated, teleported? What about the people that have merged in the ethers? Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
But I believe that we only got to experience the stuff that we're experiencing now, including bilocation, because of the zero pointing of all of the opposite energy, which was, the dark side of sex.
Color chaos.
Yeah.
I mean, really, anything that's not balanced is what? Chaos. And, okay, I don't want to go too deep, but I want to stay with the shadow work. Shadow work to me, like, you could be talking, okay, we just watched, 8 seasons of Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
8 seasons of Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
In those 8 seasons, there were all these elements of multidimensionality, multiple timelines. But at the core, just like we're all experiencing, why am I Todd? Why are you Morgan? Why are you who you are? 99.99% of the time. I don't give a shit who you're connecting to, what you're connecting to. We always come back to this. And in that place, that's where, to me, we can reveal to ourselves what we truly are. But it can't happen unless we make a list. 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, I was told to make a list of all my failures. I made a list of about 20 things, and I went into this.
You came to me and said, I'm finished.
Yeah. I went to Morgan, who was the ninja, whatever. And I said, here's my list. She said, no. So I stayed up all night long till like 4 or 5 in the morning, made a list of 136 things, right? But in that process, not even in the process of bringing up these failures and then going, oh, I failed at this, let me think of another one. But I didn't have to clear them. In the process of just bringing them up and admitting that I failed at this, I failed at that, that was so liberating, so freeing. I think we underestimate ourselves, I'll say that, and I think we underestimate the power of true shadow work, because the power of it is just going into it, having the desire to expand, and being open enough to say, you know what, maybe it is me. Well, that's what I think we're learning. It's always me.
There's also something very powerful in either drawing it down or writing it down, because you're actually embodying it. You're seeing it embodied, which is what you've done. Everything that we've experienced is an embodied experience. So by writing it or drawing it down in a piece of paper, you get to see it at an energetic, embodied reality. So then you've actually got something really clear to look at or to work with and undo.
Yeah.
You created it, so you can uncreate it. But seeing it down on paper in front of you, whether it's drawn or written down or whatever, acknowledges I've created this. It is a reality. I've embodied it. It's anchored. I've created this. Now, how can I uncreate it? And like I said, there are so many tools available now. Ono.
Let's talk about that real quick before we get off. Because when you talk about zero pointing and people that have been into certain things and receiving certain things, they move really fast. But as an example, how do you clear? How do you invocate? What is an example of invocation? Yeah, but like the one you have, which you downloaded over 2-3 years, as an example. All right, and I can think of others, but let's use this one. Let's just say, I have an issue, and my issue is that in this certain relationship, I was a victim, or I was a victimizer, whatever. I cannot identify with the other side. I cannot identify with the other side of the spectrum. That is not me. So I've come across shadow work and inner work, and now I want to rectify that. Now I want to bring it to a 0 point. You have a way of doing it with an invocation. Can you show us the invocation, but also explain how that works for the part you identify with and how it works for the part you don't?
Okay, so you give me an example of what you think that your ex did or was.
Which one? I'm just kidding. No, okay, so let's say if I'm going to write a list, and the first thing on the list, no X intended, is that's a good one. I want my cake and eat it too. In other words, I don't know which side of the narcissistic vibration I'm on, but what works for me isn't applied to you.
So my way or the highway?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you think about that, then what is the opposite energy to that?
Whatever you want. Total acceptance, allowance, accommodation.
Overgiving?
Yeah.
So overcompensating?
Yeah.
So you've got my way or the highway and overcompensating.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I would do is I would write down my way or the highway. I want my own way, or however you word that. And I would clear that. So for me, my higher self gave me, 5 or 6 years ago, an invocation. So I say to myself, that's me. Well, first up, I'd look at it. Where do I do that? Do I do that? Just my own consciousness. Do you have your way or the highway?
Okay, take it back to yourself.
I am. Do you have that active?
No, hang on. So, from your own perspective, are you over-giving? Are you overtaking? How do you go from there? Like I was
trying to do that, but I'm bringing it down to you.
Okay.
Do you have active that you want your own way at times?
Of course.
Okay. Do you have active that sometimes you give in and you overgive?
Of course.
Okay, so they're both your polarities.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if your first thought was, my ex did this, I'm looking at the polarity and saying, do you have? Why are you looking at me like that? Do you have?
Say. Keep going.
Okay. So for me, then I've written down one thing. I look for the polar opposite. So the one thing is my way or the highway. I want my own way. So for me, I go, and you better do this now. So follow after me. I accept, allow, honor, value, trust, respect,
trust, respect,
forgive, love,
forgive, love,
believe, receive,
believe, receive,
release, surrender,
release, surrender,
command,
command,
am
command,
grateful,
and grateful,
and accept full responsibility
and accept full responsibility
for all energies
for all energies
associated with
associated with
my way or the highway,
my way or the highway,
wanting my own way,
wanting my own way,
all resistance,
all resistance,
all attachment,
all attachment,
all judgment,
all judgment,
all projection,
all projection,
covering all dimensions,
covering all
are
dimensions
pure love.
of pure love.
Thank you, it is done.
Thank you, it is done.
What was the opposite?
Uh,
Overgiving.
yeah,
Okay,
accommodating.
so you've done that one. So the opposite energy is I accept, allow,
Accept, allow,
honor, value,
honor, value,
trust, respect,
trust, respect,
forgive, love,
forgive, love,
believe, receive,
believe, receive,
release, surrender,
release, surrender,
command,
command,
am grateful,
and grateful,
and accept full responsibility
and accept full responsibility
for all energies
for all energies
associated with
associated with
overgiving,
overgiving,
overcompensating, like the opposite.
overcompensating,
Whatever you think the opposite is. All resistance,
all resistance,
all attachment,
attachment,
all judgment,
judgment,
all projection,
projection,
covering all dimensions,
covering all dimensions
are pure love.
of pure love.
Thank you, it is done.
Thank you, it is done.
So looking at both spectrums and clearing both spectrums as your own, both polarities, then you should have zero pointed that pattern that plays out for you in relationships.
Mm.
You don't have to overgive, but you don't have to put up with, somebody else's my way or the highway either. So by recognizing that there's something that's going on in a relationship and owning what they're showing you as your own, as well as, how you think that you behave as your own, clears both of it and zero points that pattern from playing out in future relation.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. What else?
I don't know.
Hmm. Let's see. Oh man. Good.
Mm-hmm.